Okay, and welcome back to another instalment of USA GCSE History with Mr. Halping. Okay, so last lesson we finished, looking at the experience of Native Americans, how they were, well, I'm not going to say too much because I'll give the answers over here. And then we're going to look at a different group, and we're going to look at the group of Black Americans in USA. I'm going to look at this thing called Jim Crow. However, just like any history lesson, we cannot start it without some amazingly exciting and wonderful history knowledge questions, because remember, we can't forget what we've learned, otherwise otherwise we haven't actually learned it, have we? So we need to keep going over information all the time, and you need to do that with your revision. Okay, so what I'd like to do is make sure you've got a pen and paper ready. Pause this video and give yourself a chance to answer the questions relevant to the ones you have learned. So if you've learned USA, Crime, Punishment and Germany, like my year 10s have at the moment, then answer those. Okay, off you go. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through some of the answers. How are Native Americans treated for World War I? You could say discrimination. And then as an example, say they were assimilated. So assimilation. What changes were made? So improved. They could vote. And you could say the Merriam Report. I always remember that because my girlfriend's called Miriam, but unfortunately yours isn't, so it's not going to be easy for you to remember. You just need to constantly go over and over and over and over the information. What policy encouraged immigration in the USA? The open door. Remember, open doors easy to walk through. That just basically sums up how immigrants could easily walk into the country. When was capital punishment, or what they were called execution? When was that stopped in Britain? Okay, so that was 1969, but the last one was around 1965. What crimes were members of the IRA committing or accused of committing? Terrorism, and that was in the modern period. Okay, so 70s, 80s, well, even 90s. Who caught criminals in the medieval period? You can mention the hue and cry. I mentioned the Shire Reeve. And then what government did Hitler take over from? We've got the WG or the Weimar government. List the events which helped Hitler consolidate his power. So consolidate, remember, means going from power to more power. So it's basically after he becomes Chancellor, how does he go and get more power? How does he increase his power? So remember, we've got the Reichstag fire. Then we have the Enabling Act. Then after that we have the Night of Long Knives. This is when the army and the SA are destroyed and the army gives him support. And then you've got the death of Hindenburg, which is when Hitler takes over as president. And what did Stresemann do to help Germany? You could say new currency, the Rentenmark. You could say Dawes Plan, which reduced reparations by how many? That's it, yeah. Manageable level. You can mention Young Plan. You can mention all those things in his foreign policy. Okay, like entering the League of Nations, Kellogg-Briand Pact, all these things about helping keep peace. What were the two main laws of the religious settlement? You could talk about the Act of Supremacy or Act of Uniformity. What form of entertainment did both the rich and poor enjoy? You could mention the theatre. The theatre! Who did Elizabeth support, which helped close the Spanish Armada? You could say Protestants in the Netherlands, or what they used to call the Low Countries. Okay, great. There you go. Check your answers. See how many you got. Obviously, if you've got a few wrong, keep a note of what they were because you might want to go over those again and again and again. You might want to make those your focus of revision. So if you weren't great on Stresemann, that's what we need to be focusing on, isn't it? Okay, so I'm just going to rub these out. And we're going to be looking at USA again, obviously, because this is the USA topic. That'd be silly not to look at USA. And we've looked at Native Americans, so now we're going to look at Black Americans and how they were treated. Now, they were treated, as you can imagine, pretty awfully, because, well, you can say some people in America are still treated pretty awfully just because of the colour of their skin. But that you can also mention, so the fact that some people are treated unfairly by the police, you could say stems from what we're going to talk about today. So, Black Americans, or black people, first started out in Africa, and then they were captured by Europeans and brought to America, and they were forced into slavery. So this is when Africans were in effect owned by a white American. Okay, so they were in effect owned and made to work by white Americans. So these people have all the money, and that's a whip. So this person would often own this person and make them do work, and that is in effect slavery. So they're being treated as second-class citizens. They're being treated appallingly. If they don't do their work, they're being attacked. They're not being paid because they're slaves, so they're not being paid because this person owns them, so doesn't have to pay them. But remember, we're only looking at 1910 to 1929. So all we need to know about slavery is it brings Africans into America, and they start off at the bottom of the pile, in effect. They start off in a very, very weak position. Now, slavery is ended. Okay, so slavery is over. So now Black Americans aren't slaves. But when they just end slavery, so this is the slave, this is the white American, he's got all the money. Now, they end slavery. So let's take his chains off him, or her. Now he's going to be happy, isn't he? He's going to be happy, yeah. Is he going to be happy? No, he's really upset now. Is he now going to treat this person with respect, dignity, and treat him like an equal? Is he going to treat him like an equal? No. He is still going to treat him very unfairly. He is still going to be racist. So what this means is you treat someone differently because of where they are from or their race. So in this example, treating them differently because they're a different colour, a different skin colour. Okay, so this creates the situation that we're going to be looking at. This leads to something called Jim Crow laws. Okay, this leads to something called the Jim Crow laws. So it leads to discrimination and it leads to discrimination. So what I'd like to do now is just pause it, well, after I've asked the question. Give me a definition of what discrimination is, and then tell me what forms or what types of discrimination have we already learned about. Okay, so we talk about US, Germany, and then crime and punishment. Alright, so pause it to give yourself a chance to answer that question. Probably should take you about 5.5 minutes. Okay, so discrimination, treating someone differently, often unfairly, and what have we already looked at? Well, we've looked at immigrants, and the Red Scare treated what group unfairly or differently or discriminated against them? Is it communists? And who were assimilated? Native Americans. So we've already looked at a number of groups treated unfairly, and Black Americans are another group that are treated unfairly. You could say more, and that's what we're going to have a look at today. Germany, you could talk about Jewish people. Who else could you say? Who did Hitler hate and attacked after the Reichstag fire? Who did he blame for the Reichstag fire? That's right, communists. Okay, crime and punishment. Who did Elizabeth or Mary? Let's go in Mary. Who did Mary discriminate against? Well, she was Catholic, so she would have discriminated against Protestants, and a Protestant would discriminate against Catholics. Okay, you could also mention, as mentioned earlier, the IRA. Well, a lot of Irish people were tarred in the same brush, which means one person commits a crime. So the IRA were committing acts of terrorism, and therefore other people thought, well, all Irish people were like that. Okay, there were signs in London at one point saying no blacks, no dogs, no Irish people. Which basically means no black people allowed, no Irish people allowed, no dogs allowed. So they're basically saying black people, Irish people are the same as dogs. So it's incredibly racist, and that was happening in Britain in the modern time as well. Okay, so these Jim Crow laws. Okay, so these Jim Crow laws. This is the white person, the ex-slave holder, the person that used to own slaves. This is the black person who at some stage was a slave. Now they're free. So happy, unhappy. Is he going to want to work and live next to someone he used to treat horribly? Someone he used to own, someone he used to whip, and someone he used to treat really, really unfairly? No. He's like, I hate you. So he's going to be angry. Okay? So he's going to send this person away. He's going to want him away from him, isn't he? So he's going to get out of there. So he's then going to go to church. He's there going to get on a bus. He's there going to have a lovely big house because he's rich. Look at this amazing house. Oh, it's just beautiful. So he's going to have his church, he's going to have his bus, and he's going to be on his in his house. Now we've already said that he put this person as a slave because he thought of him as inferior, not as good as him. So is he going to want to go to the same church as this black person? No. So these churches became white people only. Is he going to want to be on the same bus as a black person? No. There weren't that many buses, so instead of having different buses, what they did was they'd have white people at the front, black people at the back. So you've got white people being really, really happy, black people being really, really sad because they're being told, oh, get to the back of the bus, you're not good enough to be at the front. And this becomes really, really important because it's not in our time frame, so we're looking at 1910 to 1929, but later, in the 50s and 60s, when black people really start to fight for their rights and to make headway, because they're always fighting for their rights, but when they start making headway, This becomes really, really important because of a lady called Rosa Parks, who one day basically gets told to move to the back of the bus because a white person wanted to sit down. She was like, no, I ain't doing that. I ain't doing that. And it kicked up a huge fuss, and people started fighting, people didn't go on the buses, and then we have the Civil Rights Act. But that's not strictly... We can't be writing about that because of the dates that we've got. 1910 to 1929, so we can't mention that. So we've got a white person going to a white-owned church. You've got different people on the buses. Now, if a white person has a white-only church, then later down the street, a black person wants to go to church as well. So he's going to have to create his own church. Okay. Now, our white people, if they don't want to be in the same church, if they don't want to be in the same bus, are they going to want to live next to a black person? No, they're not. Okay, no, they're not. So you have white people living in one place, and then black people living in another. Now, who made all the money from slavery? Remember, this guy had all the money, didn't he? Were slaves paid? No, they weren't. So did they have any money? No. So who's going to have the better house? Yeah. White people are going to have the better house. So black people, often, their houses were poor quality. Now, obviously, we're generalising hugely here. Okay, but they basically were saying that they didn't have as much money, or so they were forced to live in worse areas of town. So their houses might be a little bit beat up, or they might have a lot of people in one house because it was cheaper that way. Now, when have we learned about a lot of people living in one area, one house, causing poor living conditions? When have we learned about that before? Give it a pause to give yourself time to think. Right, if you're still struggling, think about crime and punishment. Think about the Victorian period, the industrial period, urbanisation. Remember, a lot of people moved into the city. They were poor, so they lived in small... they often had huge families in one small area, one small house, and that is what meant we had poor quality housing. Now, we've also learned about immigrants living in poor quality housing. Where did they live? Where did they live? Yeah, ghettos. Okay, so areas where black people lived have historically been called ghettos because they were poor quality housing. We've already looked at immigrants living in these areas because they couldn't afford it. Often, I know this is a huge generalisation, but often this was happening because, well, they didn't have any money after slavery, so they couldn't afford a nice house. Was this person going to pay this person a lot of money? No, because they were racist. So therefore, they didn't have as much money, therefore they couldn't afford as nice a house. Who else have we looked at living in ghettos? Who else have we looked at living in ghettos? Think about another topic we've studied. Happened in the 1930s and 40s, especially after the start of World War II, before they were sent to concentration camps. Jewish people. Okay? Jewish people. Now, this happened in Germany. Not Germany, this happened in the USA. Now, these were part of something called the Jim Crow laws. So after slavery, black people were meant to be free, they were meant to be equal. But white people didn't like it. So they said, slavery's over, but white and black people had to live separately but equally. So the white person couldn't own the black person. The white person couldn't be, the black person couldn't be a slave, but he wasn't allowed to go to the church. He wasn't allowed to get on the right bus. He wasn't allowed to live in the same houses. So he was kept separate. But they said, That's not racist. That's not racist. Yeah. We'll have a nice church, you have a nice church. Separate but equal. It's not racist to sit at the back of the bus. It's the same bus, so you're fine there. It's not racist to have different houses. I can have a lovely house. You can have a lovely house. So this separation, this keeping things apart, is called segregation. Okay? Segregation. Keeping things apart. So, white people on this side, black people on this side, this is called segregation. Now, Jim Crow laws, separate but equal. Is this separate? Yeah, it's separate. Is this equal? No, it's definitely not equal. Look at it. It's lovely house, poor quality house. Right, so it was separate, but it was equal. And this happened all over America, but mostly in the South. You had different churches. Well, this was a lovely, nice, massive church. This wasn't as big. You had buses where people had to sit at the front, people had to sit at the back, or imagine, this is the reason why it was not equal. Imagine more and more white people got on. This person was then told they had to leave. So it's separate, but it's nowhere near equal, is it? Okay. What I would like you to do now, I don't know why I've got that out. Well, I like the activity now. What I'd like you to do now is, in your books, I would like you to define segregation. I would like you to define discrimination. I would like you to define Jim Crow laws. So that's 3 things you have to define. 3 things, can't even count. And then after you've done that, I would like you to use the example of black Americans in your definition. Alright, so that should take you about 4 minutes. Okay, to make sure they're really, really good. If you want to go further than that, what you could do is draw a picture to make sure that you're really thinking about your definition, to make sure you're thinking about it in a number of ways, to make sure you've got a really, really clear idea as to what these things mean and how they are applied to this time period. Okay, so I'll go through the answers. Segregation, people were kept separate. Discrimination, people were treated differently. People were treated differently. Black and white people were treated differently. White people out at the front of the bus, black people out at the back. White people got nice houses, black people got poor houses. For Jim Crow laws, you could say Jim Crow laws were the legal system of keeping black and white people separate but treating them equally. But then you need to include that it wasn't actually equal. Okay, it wasn't actually equal. So you need to make sure you're adding in the black Americans there. Okay, so what we're now going to do is we're going to move on to almost like the red zone of the lesson. So, what you now need to do, amazing art. What you now need to do is I would like you to draw 3 concentric, the right word? 3 circles like this that overlap. It's a maths term used for this. Venn diagram. Boom. Look at me and my maths. Okay, so I'd like you to draw a Venn diagram. This should probably take up a whole page. Do it in pencil if you want to be lovely and neat. Okay, and what I would like you to do is I would like you to list the 3 main groups we have looked at that face discrimination in America. Okay, well I hope you'd add Black Americans there because we've looked at it all this lesson. Immigrants. Actually, there's 4 really, but it's tricky to do with all of them. We'll put immigrants and communists together, not that they are the same, and Native Americans. Okay, so the 3. So I might just put BA here, that's not the airway, NA here, and then I might just put COM here. Now what you need to do is in each circle you need to give me as many facts as you can that show how they were discriminated against. Okay, treated unfairly. Now, if it's just about Black Americans, it goes here. If it's just about Native Americans, it goes here. And if it's just about communists, it goes here. If it is about Black Americans and Native Americans, it goes in here. If it's about Black Americans and communists, it goes here. If it's about communists and Native Americans, it goes in here. If it's about all of them, it goes in here. Now, to give you a bit of an example, communists were feared because of something, and the term for that is the Red Scare. Look at that. I mean, look at that hint. Because of the Palmer raids, where Americans, communists, blew up Mitchell Palmer, the Attorney General's house. What did he do in retaliation to 6,000 communists, or suspected communists, I should say? Well, he deported them. Yeah. Were Black Americans deported? No. Were Native Americans deported? No. So in here, we're going to put deported. Okay? This should take you a while because you need to really, really think about how they're different, how they're similar, and that'll give you a good understanding. So this should probably take you about 6 minutes. Right, pause it to give you a chance. Off you go. Okay, so you could say Jim Crow laws here. Assimilation here. You could talk about job opportunities for both of them, because they both weren't given job opportunities. Well, actually, so weren't communists. So you could talk about jobs here. Housing, definitely, for these two. Where were they sent? Reservations. Where were they living? Ghettos. Okay. Religion changed for them massively. You could talk about Sacco and Vanzetti here. Okay, and basically try and fill it with as much as you can. Use your booklet to help you. And now that we've practiced that, what we're now going to do is we are going to have a go at a bit more recall. Okay, so again, another page. Draw your Venn diagram, and this time I want you to do one for Jewish people in Germany, one for Catholics or Protestants in Britain, and Black Americans as well. Okay? Right, so that's your red zone for the lesson. Try and include as much as you can. Off you pop. Okay, so some keywords I want you to include in here. Ghettos. Religion. Burnt at stake. I want you to mention concentration camps. Jim Crow. Job opportunities. Okay. Alright, now, next lesson, what we're going to look at is we're going to continue looking at Black Americans, because this isn't all that's happened to Black Americans throughout America's history, or in 1910 to 1929. We're going to look about why this stays the same, and then we're going to look at a group called the KKK and how they really affect Black Americans. Okay, so hope you're all doing well. Remember to send me pictures of any work you've done, starter questions, for instance, this. I'd love to mark it and help you really improve your answers. Okay, so as always, it has been an absolute pleasure. See ya.